Hey, alright guys, so I want to talk about the Theaters of War expansion. So I'm looking at this from a relatively new player perspective. You don't have these cards yet, and there really is only limited ways to get these cards. They don't have packs like they do with the other sets. And now with the Breakthrough expansion, we got to reevaluate what these cards are worth in the current meta. And so I want to take you through all the cards and figure out which ones are still viable or worth crafting. And ultimately, let's figure out if Theaters of War is worth the price that comes with it. By price, what I'm referring to is you could either pay hard cold cash for it, see here, $30 US to buy the whole thing and get to play it through, or you could use your gold for each particular faction or nation. It costs 100 gold to play through the campaigns for that particular nation. Now, if you do that, for the 100 gold, you're guaranteed to get all the cards, because all you have to do is win the battles and you go through and you get the cards for the whole nation, including the elites and the whole shebang. So from that perspective, pretty cool. But some nations I think are worth more than others in terms of what cards you actually get out of them. And so I want to go through them and give that value to it just to see where the value is the best. Now, when this first came out, Theaters of War, the campaigns, you couldn't craft these cards. The only way to get them was to actually play the campaigns. Now they've actually made an update. I didn't even notice when this update came out, but now you can actually craft the cards with your resources. So now you have another choice. Do you just craft the certain cards from the nation, or do you go ahead and pay the 100 gold, or do you just, if you have the money and want to pay the money, is it worth the 30 bucks to go and buy all of it and go ahead and play through it? So what we'll do first is let's go ahead and just take a look at what the campaign is. What do you get from it? What do you do and what do you get? And then we'll jump through the specific cards of each nation. Alright, so when you go in game and you click into the campaigns, you can see them. So this is my other account, my main account, where I've actually done all the campaigns, so I can actually show you through what's involved or what they have available to them. So you can navigate through and just see click into any different one of them. And when you go into one, click for details. So you go in and you can just see the details of the campaign. And what you can't see here though is which cards come with which battles, so you just have to go into the main collection area and you can see the cards that come for each nation. About 40 new cards were released in this expansion, so not a huge expansion, but they provided a really fun mechanic to be able to get at them by playing the campaigns. So when you come in here, you're going to pick a strategy for the campaign and just play it through. To get all the cards, you don't need to get the 3 stars, you just need to win the battle, which is the primary objective, and you could have 0 stars across the board, you still get all the cards. So effectively, that's what you get. If you do the 3 stars across the board like this, you unlock the emote. So here, achieving 15 stars in a single run will reward you an emote, Time When Men Must Die. That's the emote for Japan. So I like that emote, it was a pretty good one. If you want to see how to do the 3 stars, go check my channel here, my older videos. I did post videos for every single battle of every nation. So there's 5 battles for every nation, and so there's 25 battles, and I got 25 videos up, one for each, that shows how to get 3 stars on each. Pay the $30, it unlocks all the campaigns, or you can do one at a time with 100 gold. That's free to play, right? There is one trial that you get a free trial of Germany. So if you come to Germany, you can do the Gazala battle for free, and you get the Africa Regiment. And so everybody will get Africa Regiment as long as you just jump in here and do that one battle for free. Alright, so that's the high level of Theaters of War campaign. Let's just go through the cards. We'll rank them, A cards, B cards, to see what's worth crafting, and then figure out which nations might be worth spending the 100 gold on. As a new player, accumulating gold is a lot easier than accumulating resources. So I think it's an important decision to decide whether or not you're going to spend your crafting resources on Theaters of War cards, or if you're going to spend the 100 gold to go through and play the campaign out. Obviously, if you play the campaign out, you get to play the game, and it's a lot of fun, but it is a lot of gold. So if you're really focused on growing your collection with 100 gold, you could play probably 7 drafts, and that would give you a lot of packs to help grow your collection as well. So it's really a bit of a judgment call, but let's go through the cards and take a look, and we'll rank them and see what's worth crafting. Alright, so let's go through all 5 nations. We'll look at the main nations, the Theaters of War cards, and see what would be worthwhile to spend resources on to craft it. At the top, we're going to skip the elites because we're going to go to those at the end. And so let's talk about the standard, the limited, and the specials, because those are really the only ones you should craft. We don't recommend ever crafting elites because they're just too expensive. You get way too much value out of 320 resources to craft specials and limiteds and even some standards than going ahead and crafting the elites. So looking at this list here, we're looking at Germany. So Africa Regiment is one that you'll just get for free because that's the one free trial campaign battle everybody gets. So if you haven't done it yet, go do that battle and you get Africa Regiment. It's not a bad unit in some of the aggro decks and lower levels of play in terms of new players in that arena because of the passive effect with the 3 damage to the enemy HQ. Can play nicely as an ally to Japan aggro, for example, with that burn. So you don't need to craft it. Go get it for free. The Panzer 3G is just too expensive for what you get. It's a 3-cost deployment, 2 operation costs, 3-4 unit. It has Blitz, so you can get that out to the front line, and with the passive effect of cannot be pinned while in the front line, I guess that's a little bit attractive. Back in the day when this came out, I think there was a lot more pinning decks going on, so it had value, but we're not seeing that as much anymore. So when I compare this to a card like Flampanzer, I would much rather see you craft your Flampanzer and not craft this one. So definitely would not craft that one. The Westby is an interesting artillery as well. +2 attack if you control a tank. The cost is on par with something like Nebelwoofer, but when you look at the passives on this, +2 attack if you control a tank. That's great if you have a tank on board, but when you don't, this becomes a really expensive artillery at a 3-cost deployment with the 1 attack. And so like this here, Westby is, I'd say, a 2nd-class artillery to the Nebelwoofer. If you have the resources to craft, I would say go craft Nebelwoofer and make sure you have 3 of those in your deck before you would even consider the Westby. Pursuit, I would not craft a Pursuit. I don't think it plays at all, really. I think you might see it in draft a little bit because some people might take it, the retreat effect in draft maybe. But I mean, if you have a style of deck you want to play and that fits, go for it, but it's definitely not an A-tier card that's worth crafting. Root out the enemy, again, goes into a specific archetype. You'll see it a lot in the control decks or the discard decks because of the -2/-2. It's considered to be a decent counter to things like Japan aggro or German aggro because that -2 on the health will usually kill a lot of units. But again, it is a 4-cost to play it, and it's a special. You only get 2 of them in your deck. I don't think I would spend 160 resources crafting Root Out the Enemy. So to sum up, Germany, none of these cards are must includes or snap includes. None of these cards need to be crafted. Alright, so let's look at what Britain has to offer in the theaters of war. Delaying Tactics, C-tier card, all units to the front line must retreat. Just it's a little bit of a tempo play, but really doesn't give you a whole lot. Buys you 1 turn. Definitely would not craft these. But again, we'll talk about the elites at the end. The Honey is definitely a strong card. It's used an awful lot in British control decks to get that healing effect on the HQ, and there are some new cards on Breakthrough that synergize with the healing in the French mobilized world, so that could have some fun times in there too. But even in general, this is definitely worth crafting if you're doing a British deck to get this healing going. So you'd be looking at 60 resources to craft your Honeys. The number 1 Commando, strong card as well. In the early plays of a control deck, British control, because of the units dealt damage by this unit are destroyed, so regardless of the health on the other unit, this will just kill it. And the only barrier on this card here is the heavy armor, which blocks the damage, so it wouldn't kill it. But otherwise, it's definitely usually a snap include in most British decks as well. So another 60 resources to craft that one. Air Power is probably not craft worthy. Is a decent card in a sense, like destroying any tank sounds really appealing. Deal 2 damage to any enemy. That flexibility gives you some good choices in a game. The 2 damage you can take out an artillery, for example, or something like that, but then destroy a target tank just lets you flat out destroy any tank. So I mean, it's not a horrible removal, and Britain does not have a lot of removal, so you might find a good play for this card, but I don't think I would spend 160 resources on it to get the 2 specials. I think I would end up using like an ally that would have the removal that would be necessary, for example. East Surrey Regiment would be is a snap include in most British control decks as well. It's a nice cheap guard with a big body, 6 health. Plays really great with things like naval support and stuff like that, so definitely worth crafting this one. So 32 resources to craft the Surrey Regiment. So from the theaters of war in Britain, we're looking at 60 plus 60, 120 plus 32, 152 resources to craft the main cards that would be helpful from Britain. Alright, so let's look at the Soviet Union now. What does the Soviet have that would be worth crafting? Conscripts plays very specific to the reserves archetype. If you're looking to beef up your reserves deck, if you're looking to beef up your tokens deck, Conscripts maybe plays, but probably not. This card is actually not very good at all. There's other ways to get your reserves going. Wouldn't recommend wasting resources on the Conscripts. Standfast is an interesting card now with Breakthrough. So if you're looking at a combination with something like Bolster the Ranks, you might play Standfast and Bolster the Ranks together, for example, but that's a pretty niche thing. I mean, it's very specific. In terms of general deck usage, Standfast is not really something I would go and craft. Yura, at the time that Theaters of War came out, Yura was pretty good. It offered a lot of punch for something like tokens, dealing the extra damage to the HQ, and there were some interesting broken combos with it. But it's been nerfed now that only your Soviet units get the +3, so Yura, I definitely would not waste the resources on crafting Yura. The 1005th Rifles, it's a pretty good unit. 4 cost, 1 op, 5/3 with ambush. And if the opponent targets with a card, you get a draw. So card draw with Soviet at the time of Theaters of War was not significant. It was definitely a weakness for Soviet. That's improved with Breakthrough, but you might still find value with this card because as a standard, the punch that this guy offers isn't too bad. So for 32 resources, I'd say you can craft the 1005th Rifles. The 503rd Motor Rifles, it's just too expensive for what you get. It doesn't do much for your tokens decks either. There's other ways to beef up your tokens. I think I would focus on your USA cards to get your tokens going and not spend the resources on crafting this one. I would craft the other cards that are required from the USA to really give your tokens a punch, like the Weekend Duets, for example, would be a much better investment than the 503rd Motors. Okay, so 17th Rifle Regiment, I give this card like a B list. I mean, maybe. Depends on what style of Soviet you're going to play. If you're looking to beef up a control deck, maybe, with a lot of punch and some heavy bodies, then you can go ahead and craft this. So we'll say you could put this on your crafting list, and as a limited, that's another 60. So from the Soviet perspective, I would say you're only looking at crafting the 60 plus 32, 92 resources to craft the 2 cards from the Soviet. Alright, so let's take a look at what USA has to offer. So the 164th Infantry Regiment, I wouldn't waste resources on crafting it. It's an interesting card, but and you can do some neat things with it, but definitely not worth wasting your resources. On Destruction, to give a random friendly 1/1. If you can control it in the early game, it's kind of nice because you can control where the buff goes, but in general, I wouldn't go out of my way to craft this one, but it is a decent card. A Direct Hit is an interesting card to me. It has a new synergy because of the Bolster the Ranks and the 75th Rangers. You're looking at potentially getting some really big units on the board that have a 0 op cost. Those are Breakthrough cards that came out, right? And so this guy here as a counter to those could be pretty useful, but it's pretty expensive, so I don't think I would craft them at 160 resources, but definitely you can get value to tech against those 0 op cost units, and at a 1 cost it actually techs against the Jagro as well. So I mean, this card does tech against some of the big meta plays that you're seeing nowadays. So I mean, if you have the resources, I would definitely look at crafting this, but as a B tier craft, not an A tier. The 2/5 Marines are super strong. They trade up almost all the time, dealing double damage against units in the front line. So definitely very useful. Plays in a lot of the style of decks with USA because of that extra punch that it has. So definitely worth crafting. Patrol, in my mind, Patrol is a super strong card. I would definitely craft that one. I think it replaces Gunship Mission. So if you're playing Gunship from the base set, consider adding Patrol instead. Patrol is a little bit more diversified in that it makes a unit lose guard, deals the 2 damage to it. It can remove Smokescreen, and it removes Destruction. So looking at the USA Corsair that has the Death from Above on a stick, looking at all of the Japanese aggro destruction effects, I mean, you could really slow down a bit of Jagro with that. It has a lot more flexibility. It can hit the front line and not just the support line like the Gunship. So I think this was an improvement to Gunship Mission in a sense. So unless you're playing a style of deck that requires the Gunship Mission's healing effect on your HQ, I would say ditch it and get yourself some Patrols. And the only other effect that you would lose is that Gunship could hit face. But I don't think that that is a significant enough value to outweigh the benefits of Patrol. Special Delivery, when it came out, it would draw you 3 cards instead of 2. So I think with the nerf down to 2 cards makes this really less useful. Air Cobra is a solid card. I would craft these for sure. In the early world of new players, in terms of what your collection has to offer and the opponents you're going against, Air Cobra is very strong. It definitely people definitely want to get this off the board because of the fact that it takes 2 less damage from ground units. It could kill artillery, most artillery for free. It can kill a lot of things, and just basically with the 2 less damage, you're looking at being able to kill a lot of units. Usually trading out 3 for 1 on this guy because of the damage reduction that it takes, and really puts pressure on the opponent to deal with it. So I definitely would craft this one. So for USA, we're looking at these 3 limiteds to craft. So that's 60. The patrol is another 60, and Aircrow is another 60. So 180 resources to craft everything you need from USA. All right, let's look at Japan. All right, so target acquired. I wouldn't craft it. Not really worthwhile at all. Destroy target unit that was attacked this turn. I actually like this card in draft, but I don't ever think I would see it in constructed. Outflank. Destroy target unit with guard. Again, this is very specific. Depending on what you're seeing a lot of, maybe this card comes in handy. It's very tech against a very certain type of card. Like, it's very specific. And cards that are very specific, when you're looking at using your resources on them, you want to get the most value out of a card that you can. And so with this one here, it's not going to add that much value to your deck. You're going to be excited every now and then when you kill a guard and then you get lethal, but realistically, I wouldn't waste resources on that. And the 61st Infantry Regiment with the guard, the 4/4 for 4 guard destruction, draw card. It's a decent card. Probably worth constructing. I think there's a lot of Japan decks that you could use that in. It's used a lot in control decks as well, and if you want to fool around with discard and draw denial and things like that, it's useful because it slows down the opponent and it gives you some card draw, and it's relatively cheap. So you do see it played a lot in that regard. So you might consider crafting this one. So that'll be 60 resources to craft that one. Scouting Party. Draw 5 cards, discard drawn cards that are not Japanese units. This is a niche card in my opinion. I think this is your budget Feigned Retreat. So Feigned Retreat is the elite that you can discard your hand, and every time you play a unit for the rest of the battle, you get to draw another card. So you just basically keep drawing cards as long as you have units. So it's a very light on orders. There's usually only 2 or 3 orders in a Feigned Retreat deck. And so thinking along those lines, if you want to try to do a budget version of Feigned Retreat, Scouting Party might be a way to do it. But I don't think I'd go out of my way crafting it unless I really just wanted to play with that. If I was really being disciplined on growing my collection in the most cost-efficient way, I would not craft Scouting Party for that reason. Taipei Regiment is worth crafting if you don't have them. It's 4 standard cards, so it's only 32 resources, and the 0 op cost for 5 to go out with the 3/3 body with Blitz and Fury is great for snapping out and plugging the front line. There's a lot of cases where you can trade this off 2 for 1, killing off 2 units with the Fury, and plus you get the burn on the HQ for 2. So if you have 4 of these in your hand, that's 8 damage against the HQ. So depending on what other Japanese cards you have for aggro, this card could play well as a standard card into that deck. The Tenzen is just not a great card. Deploy it, pin a unit, but if it's already pinned, it will destroy it instead. If you're doing a pin deck and you have a lot of pin synergy and you think that there's a lot of value to that deck, go for it, but it's not one I would recommend as a snap crafting. So from Japan, I'm looking at 2 cards to craft. The 61st Infantry for 60 resources and Taipei for 32. So 92 resources to craft the 2 cards for Japan. Alright, so looking at the big picture here, to craft all of the Theaters of War cards that I consider to be relevant to the meta of the game right now, you're looking at 516 total resources. That's a lot of resources. For new players, gathering resources is a really slow process because you don't have all the cards, so every time you get new cards, you're not getting duplicates, so you're not getting resources. So gold, though, is something you accumulate much faster as an early player, so the question becomes, is it worth spending the 100 gold then to go through these campaigns and get all the cards versus spending your resources on it? I personally think that some of the campaigns are worth the gold and the other ones you're just not worth bothering for. So when looking at it, I think USA and Britain are probably the most valuable ones that you can do, obviously based on total resources. Britain because of the cards you get as the standard limited cards that you get, but USA is also just the standard limited cards you get, but also the elites that are involved. So right now let's go through all the elites and we'll see why that is. Okay, so looking at the elites, so you can see like with Germany, the Exploit the Gap is just a crap card, really. You're not going to use that ever. It has no value. It's not played in the game at all. But the Africa Core is a pretty strong card. You'll see that played an awful lot. The pool of elites with Germany is quite strong. And the only way you're going to get this Africa Core is if you spend 320 resources on crafting it, or if you play through the campaign. So for 100 gold, you can play through the campaign, unlock all the Germany cards, and get Africa Core. Considering there's no other cards that are craftable in Germany, in my opinion, it's probably something that maybe you do wait to get the resources to craft it, or if you get a gold elite, you swap it out and create an Africa Core. But again, playing the campaigns are fun, so you could do it that way as well, but I wouldn't prioritize Germany as a campaign play if I was looking at optimizing my resource usage. Britain, His Majesty Chosen, the pool of elites, not fantastic. So what you're going to get from this in a game situation, probably not going to give value to your situation. But Rule of Britannia is quite a good card. So realistically, playing through Britain is probably worth it, considering the craftable cards that are there and the fact that this Rule of Britannia is such a strong card. I would say playing through Britain is worthwhile for the 100 gold. On the Soviet side, Heroes of the Soviet Union is super strong. It's a really good card because Soviet Union has a really deep pool of elites, and you're most often going to get something useful to fit your game situation with Heroes of the Soviet Union. Tractor Factories is also super strong. It's recently been buffed from a 9 cost to an 8 cost, and so what you're looking at is getting 2 T-34s on your support line added to the game, and the Blitz is in effect. So Tractor Factories is a great elite card. It's definitely part of a snap include in the Soviet control meta, so it could be worthwhile. The question is, for 100 gold, the other cards that are available within Soviet for crafting, not that substantial, so you may not consider, if you're not interested in beefing up your Soviet deck at this time, the 100 gold for Theaters of War may not be worth it. Again, get a gold elite, maybe you swap it out for Tractor Factories. If you get a crappy elite that's not useful, maybe you could swap your resources that way, so there's one for the other, and save on spending the 320 from your accumulated resources otherwise. USA, the Few Good Men is not a super strong card because of the elites pool that's there, but High Altitude Bombing is super strong, and so I would say that with the other cards that are available in USA for crafting, USA is probably a decent one to do because High Altitude Bombing is really good, but this is really only if you're interested in playing ramp. If you're looking at beefing up your ramp deck, High Altitude plays really well. Otherwise, with USA, an 8 cost for the 2 DFAs here, Death from Aboves. I don't know. It's definitely a 50-50 decision to do the USA for 100 gold versus doing draft to build up your collection with the other sets. Japan, not worth doing for these specifics. I would say for Japan, just spend the resources on crafting the specific cards. The 100 gold on Japan to be able to get at these elites is not going to be worth it, in my opinion. So that's a summary of the elites, of what you get and whether or not I think it would be worth spending the 100 gold on.